Good evening and welcome. We begin today with updates on the Marburg outbreak in Rwanda. The Rwanda Health Ministry announced that there is now 36 cases in the country, reported cases in the country. And as we reported earlier this week, that the American CDC, the US CDC, the Center for the CDC is working with the ministry, have sent deployed experts to Rwanda, and the ministry also is working with African stakeholders to contain the spread of the outbreak. And we will continue to monitor the story and bring you updates on that. Now, moving to another update, President Biden traveled today to Florida to tour the site of the devastation from the Hurricane Helene. The president also will meet with local and state officials as well as businesses that are affected. The administration will continue to provide assistance through FEMA to those that are in need and encourage individuals as well as businesses to sign up through the FEMA portal. We'll continue to provide additional updates on the administration emergency response and recovery effort throughout this week as we get those information. Moving to other stories that we are following today. The IMF had a press briefing that we attended, and there are updates that we will provide today regarding the global economic. First, let's go to the ongoing port strike in the US that started 3 days ago. The IMF said it is carefully monitoring the development and said that it's too early to assess the impact on the global economic, but the fund hope that an agreement will be reached soon between the parties to ensure smooth operation of supply chain. There are on the East Coast and the Gulf Coast, there are several port workers that have striked, and it could have significant implication on supply chain as well as the global economic. So we will continue to monitor this story and provide updates on the ongoing strike. And moving to an update in the Middle East, the IMF regarding the ongoing escalation, the war, the crisis in the Middle East between Gaza, in Israel, and also the recent Iranian attack, the crisis going on right now in Lebanon, that pose several implications to regional economic as well as the global economy. So the IMF said is closely monitoring the escalating situation in the Middle East with great concerns and urge all for an end to all conflicts. It also added that potential further escalation with heightened risk and uncertainty and could have significant economic consequences on the regional and the global economic, as we mentioned, particularly in hard-hit areas like West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, Egypt, Israel, which now face their socio-economic conditions, humanitarian crisis, and significant decline in their GDP. So the IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak provided this update that they are urging an end to the crisis. As we know, the U.S. government, President Biden, they've led a negotiation, and President Biden put down a three-phase deal for Israel and Gaza to end this crisis. And they continue to work with the Israeli Prime Minister, the Israeli government as well as the other side, the Palestinian, they are working with regional allies, including Jordan, including Qatar, as well as Egypt, to relieve humanitarian disaster that is unfolding, as well as bring an end to the crisis that have killed thousands of people, significantly, especially impacts women and girls, significantly in Palestine, in the Gaza area. So we will continue to provide additional updates, and the IMF said during the IMF World Bank spring meeting that will take place at the end of this month that there will be additional more detail in the regional economic outlook for the Middle East, as well as the world economic outlook that they produce at every meeting. So we will continue to provide additional updates for you regarding those news. And in Lebanon, the fund said they are supporting Lebanon through capacity development and is prepared to engage on a financing program if decisive measures are taken. As we know, there is Israel and Lebanon right now. There's an escalation through the attack from Iran on Israel, and Israel is fighting war in Lebanon to get rid of the Hezbollah group that lives in the region. So again, the IMF said is supporting the Lebanon government through capacity development and is prepared to engage in a financing program if decisive policy measures are taken. The fund is also, I asked regarding the situation in Libya that started in the summer of this year, where the central bank governor were dismissed and reinstated and then fired. So the fund said they welcomed the agreement to end the standoff over the central bank leadership in Libya, which paved ways to resume operation and oil production and exports. Libya real GDP expanded 10% in 2023 due to rebound from oil production stoppage in 2022. The key medium-term challenge for the nation, the IMF said, is to diversify away from hydrocarbon and promote stronger and more inclusive private sector growth. This, according, is what the IMF spokesperson Julie Stoker said in response to our question regarding the impact, what is going on in Libya, and because we're seeing more of this crisis, more of this issue, the split over of political situation into monetary policy. We've seen that in Nigeria, in the past administration. We see that one of the candidates, the Republican candidate for presidential candidate in the U.S. Continue to call for an interference political, said if he's elected, it will have more say in the U.S. monetary policy. Of course, the current administration have continued to support the Federal Reserve independence, as the IMF and other financial institutions have encouraged that separation is necessary for monetary policy and for each nation economic. So they are supporting and welcome the agreements that end the standoff of the Central Bank of leadership in Libya. We will continue to follow this story as well. Libya is one of the biggest oil company exporter in Africa, and is also a member of the OPEC. So we will continue to follow that story as well. And the next story that we're following is an update. We reported on this earlier this week that the presidents of Malawi and the presidents of Sierra Leone are in Washington, D.C. and met with the managing director of the IMF, Christina Georgieva. I saw the IMF as well as the MDO, the managing director of operation of the World Bank, the building right here on my right, for discussion on the nation, how to continue to support the nation economic growth. So the IMF, the spokesperson, we asked about details about the meeting, and they said the managing director met with the President Bayo of Sierra Leone to discuss the fund support for the country's economic stabilization effort and policy action and arrangement on the new 36-month ECF arrangement. So as we know, the fund continued to provide a financing assistance, as well as the U.S., the Biden-Harris administration, also through their Millennium Challenge Corporation, also provided funding to the country. Over $400 million were provided, were signed with the country to support electricity, access to electricity, as well as other critical things that are needed in the country right now. The country just came out in the past couple of years, recovering, continue to recover, as we mentioned, from the civil war, for years of civil war, and now the current president is trying to, direct the paths of the country economic, put it in the right direction. And the managing director meeting with the Malawi president, in the managing director, IMF managing director meeting with the Malawi president, they discussed the country's macroeconomic policy and reform under the Malawi ECF, and they also discussed strategy to boost growth and progress on Malawi debt restructuring strategy. The MD, the managing director, also reaffirmed the fund's commitment to support the country's economic stabilization. And moving to another country that we are focusing on, in Kenya, the African Development Bank announced that it is investing $10 million in equity in a Kenya company called the Aman Guarantee, which will support critical sections like transportation, water, renewable energy, and waste management. Also, the bank, also the African Development Bank, also announced that they unveiled a gender marker system dashboard that will track and strengthen efforts to ensure 80% of the fund that it provides of the public sector operation and 50% of private sector operation directly benefit women and girls across the continent. Moving to another story, sort of an update, but this is a new story on Gabon. We reported earlier this week that the government also is in Washington, D.C. on the Gabon for, so the U.S. announced $5 million to support Gabon democratic transition and governance. So another story that we are following is Senegal. The U.S., African Development Bank, and Senegal signed $600 million deal to strengthen social and economic development in the Sahel, as well as address regional critical issues. The funding we help improve the quality of lives for millions of people in the region, in the Sahel region. The president of Senegal, we've reported on this, our audience, we know about this, that he attended the UNGA, his first time at the UNGA since he was elected into office, but he also used the opportunity to travel, meet with American private sector. He traveled to Silicon Valley, and he also traveled, he met with the NVIDIA CEO. NVIDIA is a microchip maker, to talk about workforce development exchange. We are seeing more of this between the U.S. and African nations, as well as economic partnership. So we continue to follow that story, and we will provide additional updates to you guys. And another story that we've been following now is Sudan. We reported that the U.S. Special Envoy for Sudan traveled to Kenya and Ethiopia, and he met with the Kenya National Security Advisor to discuss and explore regional solutions to end the Sudanese crisis. And just we wanted to provide a correction on one of our reports. We reported that the U.S. government, through the USAID, invests $500 million in humanitarian crisis. We want to correct that number. The number we rounded the amount up is not exactly 500. The amount that was donated is 400, I believe is 420 or 480 million dollar, and then an additional 1.5 million dollar were also given to South Sudan for humanitarian assistance, as well as to provide support to continue to help Sudanese and South Sudanese refugees that are currently displaced across the continent. So we wanted to bring that correction that sometimes we will round up the number in calculation, but it's, we didn't want any misinformation or incorrect information. So I wanted to bring that to your attention, and I thank you very much for your understanding, for understanding. The Senate, and continue on Sudan news, the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Rich, Senator Cruz, Senator Helene, and four senators introduced a new bipartisan bill to ensure accountability for the atrocity in Sudan war and protect Sudanese, protect the civilian. As I said, the bill was sponsored by Senator Rich, Cruz, Shaher, and Todd Young. We will continue to follow that information, that new bill that was introduced in the U.S. Senate, and provide additional updates and see if we can have a sit-down interview with one of the senators. Senator Cruz has been a supporter of African nation, traveled to during the earlier on in the Biden-Harris administration. He was the one that traveled to Ethiopia to meet with the Ethiopian Prime Minister, as well as the other side, Ray, regarding negotiation and bringing an end to that crisis, the civil war between Ethiopia and Tigray. So, and as I said, he's been a long supporter of African nations, of African, and as well as advocate for more U.S. and Africa engagement. So we will continue to follow that story as well. And Mauritius, we met the foreign minister at the UNGA, though we didn't get a chance to interview him. They said hi to us when we greeted him. So the President Biden applauded the new UK Mauritius agreement that was recently announced that will give Mauritius sovereignty over one of these locations, and we will continue to. I don't have the full information here with me. I just took down the note, and I will provide additional updates either tomorrow or this week. Again, the full detail of that will be included in our daily newsletter as well. And yeah, so wrapping this up, as we announced earlier that not today, we've announced it that President Biden will be traveling to Africa. He's traveling to Angola in just a few more days. And just what we did when President Ruto came to the U.S. So we are doing a special coverage, a countdown to his trip to Angola as well. So we took the opportunity to talk to Africans in the diaspora as well as just African to hear their perspective on what this trip from the U.S. President Biden, as well as U.S.-African relationship. And the Africans have a lot to say, and so we will be bringing that to you. But to kick this off, we're kicking this off today. And today I had a chance, just coincidentally, to talk to young Sierra Leone Americans, and two Sierra Leone Americans and one Sierra Leonean there. I was visiting the Washington, the DMV area, to talk to them about the President Biden trip to Angola, and what they think, what it means to them, and what they think of the U.S. African relations. So this is what they have to say. My brothers and sisters from
Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone. Yeah. Okay, so quick question for you. President Biden is going to Africa this month. Your president was just in Washington, D.C. recently, as well as in New York at the UN General Assembly. You guys are the youth of the future of the continent as well as the world. Talk to me about the administration under this president. Have invested heavily in Africa and in African youth, in digital technology, in human capital. How do you see his trip? What is your view?
Which president? The one here in America or the one in Sierra Leone?
Well, let's start with the one in America that is visiting Africa.
It's good that he's going there. So we're happy to welcome him back there. Then for my president, he's doing well for capital development, human development, and education. So.
Okay. Yeah. And in terms of what would you like the U.S. to do more about investment and trade?
Yeah. That's it.
That's it?
Yeah.
And you're just happy to have him go to the continent?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I ran into you.
Okay.
You are from Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And you're a student here in the U.S. studying. So you are the ideal person for me to ask this.
Okay.
President Biden, President Joe Biden, is traveling to Africa this month, the first time that a U.S. president will visit the continent. in over 10 years. Although a lot of his cabinet members, including the vice president, the secretary of state, and the first lady, as well as other leaders from the US, have traveled to the continent, even senators, to engage with African leaders, with African civil society. There's a lot of investments that the administration has done in the last 3 years. Over $63.5 billion investments across the continent in various sectors. There is a huge project that the president has led through the G7 alliance to build a railway that connects Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean, connectivity between Angola, Zambia, DRC, and Tanzania, that we improve supply chains as well as businesses to help African businesses in terms of manufacturing, in terms of exporting to the US and other countries. So in a wrap shot, what is your view?
We need to be somewhere.
Well, what is your view on the president's visit to Africa?
I think it's good. I think it's a show of solidarity between the US and Africa. He has been the first leader to visit in about 10 years, like you said. So I think it's good for relations between Africa and the US. So I wish there were more economic cooperation between the two, Africa and the US. That's my point of view. So this is a good thing.
So you wish there's more cooperation, more partnership between the US and African nations?
Yes, that's my point of view. So I think it's a good thing that he has done, because he has shown that he is willing to cooperate with African countries and find solutions to the problems facing the African continent.
Okay. As I said, this wrap up our news for today. Thank you very much for watching. Oh, before I go, I know some will send me an email asking why are we not in the usual spot. Well, this is also sort of a preparation. We were at the IMF headquarters earlier today for the press briefing. So this area, the World Bank is on this side, and the IMF building is right behind me, H1 and H2. Like I said, the IMF World Bank for meeting will take place at the end of this month, and it's a week this whole area will be packed. You will see finance ministers, civil society, central bankers from over 200 countries that will descend in Washington DC in this location, attending meetings, doing negotiation with officials of the IMF as well as the World Bank regarding financing, and we will be bringing you more updates. It's also, before I go, the 80th anniversary that this multinational, multi-financial institution were established 80 years ago through the Bretton Woods program. So we will continue to, and we have more information on that as well, on what they are doing and how this multi-financial institution is working to address reform, to improve their engagement with the members and stakeholders in all the member states that they. This concludes our news wrap and update for today. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Kemi Oshukoya. I will see you again tomorrow. Have a good evening.